Montana Territory, 1875. The wind howled like a lone wolf through the streets of Silver Creek as Zara Nichols huddled beneath the shelter of an abandoned storefront. Her once beautiful chestnut locks had been cruelly shorn to the scalp, leaving behind uneven patches that told a story of malice and shame. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled the tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, her wedding band catching the dim light of dawn, a bitter reminder of the family who had betrayed her. "You're a disgrace to the Callahan name," her father-in-law had spat before ordering his sons to hold her down. The cold bite of the shears against her scalp would forever be etched in her memory. Just 3 months a widow, and this was how they treated James's bride, accused of impropriety with no chance to defend herself. "You're coming with me," said the rancher, his voice cutting through the morning chill like a knife. Zara startled, looking up to find a young man standing before her. No more than 25, with sandy brown hair peeking out beneath a well-worn Stetson and eyes the color of a summer sky. His lean frame cast a long shadow in the morning light, but there was nothing threatening in his stance despite the firm set of his jaw. "I don't know you," she whispered, shrinking back against the wall. "Name's Von Keller," he replied, removing his hat and revealing more of those kind eyes that seemed to look right through her. "I own the Double K Ranch outside town. My cook saw what those Callahan men did to you in the street yesterday. No one stepped in to help you then, and I aim to correct that wrong now." Zara looked away, shame burning her cheeks. Why would you help a woman they say has no virtue? Vaughn crouched down to her level, careful to keep a respectful distance. "Because I know a lie when I hear one. James Callahan was my friend, and he spoke of you with nothing but love and respect. His family is using his death to take his land, your land now. They're trying to drive you out with shame." Hope flickered in Zara's heart for the first time in days. Could this stranger truly believe in her innocence when the entire town seemed to have turned its back? "You have 2 choices," Vaughn continued, extending his hand. "Stay here and let them win, or come with me to my ranch where you can recover your strength and dignity. I give you my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe." What choice did she truly have? With trembling fingers, Zara placed her hand in his. Neither of them noticed the shadowy figure watching from across the street, eyes narrowed with calculation and spite. Sheriff Thomas Callahan, her late husband's uncle, stroked his mustache thoughtfully. This unexpected development would need to be dealt with, and soon. The Double K Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of Montana's finest grazing land, with a 2-story main house that spoke of prosperity without ostentation. As they approached in Vaughn's wagon, Zara couldn't help but compare it to the modest cabin she had shared with James before typhoid had claimed him just 3 months into their marriage. "My sister Rebecca lives here too," Vaughn explained as he helped Zara down from the wagon. "She'll get you situated with clothes and whatever else you need." Rebecca Keller proved to be as kind as her brother, a tall, slender woman of 22 with the same sandy hair and blue eyes. She gasped at the sight of Zara's shorn head, but recovered quickly. "Those monsters," she whispered, leading Zara inside. "Come with me. A hot bath and fresh clothes will help, and I have some herbal salves for any cuts on your scalp." Later, wrapped in a borrowed robe with her wounds tended, Zara sat at the kitchen table while Rebecca prepared tea. The fragrant steam rising from the cup reminded her of simpler times, before grief and cruelty had become her daily companions. "Why would Vaughn do this for me?" Zara asked quietly. "Take in a stranger, risk his reputation?" Rebecca's hands stilled on the teapot. "My brother has his reasons. He's a good man with a strong sense of justice. But there's more." She hesitated, glancing toward the door. "It's not my place to say. Just know that he understands what it means to be judged unfairly." Before Zara could press further, Vaughn entered, his shirt sleeves rolled up and hat in hand. "I've sent word to Judge Patterson in Helena. He's a fair man who won't be swayed by the Callahan family's influence. What they did to you was criminal, Zara, and your marriage contract gives you rights to James's property." "You seem to know a great deal about my situation," Zara observed, studying his face for any sign of deception. "James and I grew up together before his family came into money and started putting on airs. He wrote to me about you, how you taught at the schoolhouse in Butte before you married, how your parents had passed, and you had no family of your own." Vaughn's gaze was direct, honest. He was proud to call you his wife. Tears welled in Zara's eyes at the mention of her beloved James. They said I had been unfaithful, that I had dishonored his memory. And anyone who knew James knows that's hogwash, Vaughn replied firmly. The Callahans want the silver mine that was discovered on the north corner of James's property, your property. They're using shame to run you off so they can claim it all. The revelation stunned Zara. Silver? She had no idea. James had only mentioned struggling to make the ranch profitable. Had he discovered the silver before he died and kept it from her to protect her? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Rebecca answered it to find a breathless young ranch hand. Mr. Keller, sir. Sheriff Callahan is riding this way with 5 men. Vaughn's expression hardened. Get Mrs. Nichols upstairs, Rebecca, and bring me my rifle. As Rebecca hurried her toward the stairs, Zara's heart pounded with fear and confusion. What would happen now? And what secrets was Vaughn Keller still keeping from her? Sheriff Thomas Callahan sat astride his horse with the arrogant posture of a man accustomed to getting his way. Behind him, 5 men, including Zara's brothers-in-law, waited with hands hovering near their weapons. Keller, the sheriff called out as Vaughn stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. You've got something that belongs to the Callahan family. There's nothing here that belongs to you, Thomas, Vaughn replied evenly. Mrs. Nichols is a widow and entitled to her late husband's property under the law. The sheriff spat tobacco juice onto the dirt. That woman has forfeited any right to the Callahan name or property through her immoral behavior. We have witnesses. Paid witnesses, I'd wager. Vaughn's grip on his rifle tightened almost imperceptibly. Judge Patterson will be interested to hear how you've treated a widow in your care. Assault, public humiliation, theft of property. Those are serious charges, Sheriff. From her vantage point at an upstairs window, Zara watched the confrontation unfold, her heart in her throat. Rebecca stood beside her, a small Derringer pistol clutched in her hand. My brother won't back down, Rebecca whispered. He's faced worse odds. Why? Zara asked, the question that had been haunting her since morning finally escaping her lips. Why would he risk everything for me? Rebecca's eyes remained fixed on the scene below. 3 years ago, Vaughn was engaged to marry Eleanor Callahan, Thomas's daughter. A week before the wedding, she was found in compromising circumstances with the banker's son. To save face, the Callahans claimed Vaughn had mistreated her, forced himself upon her. They cut her hair off as punishment for tempting men and banished her to a convent in St. Louis. Zara gasped. That's horrible. What happened? Eleanor took her own life rather than live with the shame, Rebecca said softly. Vaughn tried to clear his name, but the Callahans' influence was too great. Many still believe he's guilty, though no charges were ever brought. When he heard what they did to you, using the same tactics, he couldn't stand by. Below, the tension mounted as Thomas Callahan dismounted his horse. I have a warrant for the arrest of Zara Nichols on charges of adultery and theft, the sheriff announced, producing an official-looking paper. Step aside, Keller, or be charged as an accomplice. Vaughn didn't move. Your warrant isn't worth the paper it's written on, Thomas. We both know Judge Patterson wouldn't sign such a thing. Did you forge his signature, or just bribe that drunk clerk of his? The sheriff's face reddened. This is your last warning. Hand over the woman. Not today. Not ever. Vaughn raised his rifle slightly. Now get off my property before I exercise my right to defend it. For a moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then the distant sound of hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. A cloud of dust on the horizon heralded the approach of several riders. Vaughn's ranch hands returning from the north pasture, at least a dozen strong. Sheriff Callahan assessed the changing odds and stepped back. This isn't over, Keller. That woman will answer for her crimes, and you'll regret interfering in Callahan family business. As the unwelcome visitors departed, Zara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The danger had passed for now, but something told her this was only the beginning of her troubles, and perhaps the beginning of something else entirely as she watched Vaughn standing tall and uncompromising in the afternoon sun. 2 weeks passed at the Double K Ranch, during which Zara's hair began to grow back in soft, chestnut wisps. The physical wounds were healing, but the emotional ones remained raw. Each night, she woke from nightmares of being held down, the cold metal of scissors against her scalp, the mocking laughter of the Callahan men. One such night, unable to return to sleep, she made her way downstairs for a cup of tea. To her surprise, She found Vaughn sitting at the kitchen table, a single lamp burning low as he pored over what appeared to be legal documents. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "The dreams still come," she admitted, moving to the stove to heat water. Vaughn finally raised his eyes to meet hers. In the lamplight, he looked younger, the weight of responsibility temporarily lifted from his shoulders. His cotton shirt was open at the collar, revealing a strong neck and the beginning of a chest dusted with golden hair. Zara quickly averted her gaze, disturbed by the flutter in her stomach. "I have something for you," he said, pushing a document across the table. "Judge Patterson sent it today. It's an injunction against the Callahans, preventing them from interfering with your property until a formal hearing can be held." Zara sat across from him, scanning the legal terminology. "This says I need to physically occupy the property to maintain my claim." "Yes." Vaughn's expression was unreadable. "You'll need to return to your homestead soon." The thought filled Zara with dread. "I can't go back there alone. They'll just come for me again." "You won't be alone," Vaughn assured her. "I've arranged for 2 of my most trusted hands to stay in your barn for protection." And he hesitated, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as nervousness. "I'll ride over each day to check on you." Zara studied his face in the golden lamplight. "Why are you doing all this, Vaughn?" "Rebecca told me about Eleanor. I understand you want justice, but this goes beyond that." A muscle worked in Vaughn's jaw as he considered her question. "When James and I were boys, we made a pact to always look out for each other. I failed him once when I didn't stand against his family's corruption. I won't fail him, or you again." "Is that the only reason?" Zara asked softly. Their eyes met across the table, and something electric passed between them, something neither was ready to acknowledge. "It's reason enough for now," Vaughn finally replied, gathering his papers. "Try to get some rest, Zara. Tomorrow we start preparing for your return home." As he left the kitchen, Zara remained at the table, her tea forgotten as she wondered about the unspoken emotions she'd glimpsed in Vaughn's eyes. Was she imagining things, or was there something more than obligation driving his protection of her? And more troubling still, why did the thought make her heart race with both guilt and hope? The homestead looked smaller than Zara remembered, a simple 2-room cabin with a lean-to kitchen, a small barn, and a corral. The garden she had so lovingly tended was now overrun with weeds, and the cabin itself showed signs of having been ransacked. "They were looking for the deed," Vaughn observed as they surveyed the upturned furniture and scattered belongings. "And probably any evidence of the silver strike." Zara knelt to retrieve a shattered picture frame containing her wedding portrait. "James never mentioned any silver to me." "He wouldn't have, not until he was certain," Vaughn said, helping her right a heavy table. "The last time I spoke with him, about a month before he fell ill, he hinted at a discovery that would change everything for you both. I think he was planning to surprise you once he'd confirmed the value." By sunset, they had restored some order to the cabin. Vaughn's men, Carlos and Matthew, had established themselves in the barn and set up a watch rotation. As Vaughn prepared to leave, an awkward moment stretched between him and Zara at the doorway. "I'll return tomorrow with supplies," he promised. "Lock your door and keep that shotgun close. If there's any trouble, any at all, fire a shot into the air and Carlos or Matthew will come running." Impulsively, Zara reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you, Vaughn. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." His eyes softened as he looked down at her hand on his sleeve. "Seeing justice done is payment enough. Good night, Zara." Alone in the cabin that night, surrounded by memories of her brief happiness with James, Zara fought against conflicting emotions. Grief for her lost husband warred with a growing attraction to Vaughn Keller, a man whose quiet strength and integrity reminded her so much of James, yet was entirely his own person. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Zara clutched the shotgun closer, jumping at every sound. When a distinctive knock came at the door, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slow ones, the signal Vaughn had established, she nearly cried with relief. But it wasn't Vaughn who stood on her porch. "Mrs. Nichols," said a soft female voice. "Please, I need your help." The woman wore a heavy cloak with the hood drawn up, but when she pushed it back, Zara gasped. The resemblance to Sheriff Callahan was unmistakable in the young woman's features, though her expression held none of his cruelty. "I'm Victoria Callahan," she said urgently. "Eleanor was my sister, and I have information about what my family is planning against you and Vaughn Keller." Victoria Callahan sat at Zara's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea for warmth. At 19, she was the youngest of Sheriff Callahan's children and, by her own admission, largely overlooked within the family. After what they did to Eleanor, I started watching, listening, Victoria explained. They think I'm simple because I'm quiet, but I hear everything. My father and brothers plan to burn you out tomorrow night. They've paid 3 men from up north to do it. Men with no connection to Silver Creek who can disappear afterward. Zara's blood ran cold. Why are you telling me this? Why risk yourself? Victoria's eyes, a softer version of her father's steely gray, filled with tears. Because I loved my sister, and I watched her die inside a little more each day after what they did to her. What they did to you is the same cruelty, the same lies. I can't stop them, but I can warn you. We need to alert Vaughn, Zara said, rising from her chair. No. Victoria grabbed her wrist. My father has men watching the trails between here and the Double K. If I'm seen, or if your men ride out. She left the threat unspoken. Then what can we do? Victoria pulled a folded paper from inside her cloak. This is a map to the silver deposit on your property. James showed it to my brother Robert before he died, not realizing Robert would betray his trust. If you can find proof of the silver and file a mineral rights claim before they burn you out, not even my father can fight the federal mining laws. Zara studied the crude map. This shows the deposit in the northwest corner, in a cave system. Yes, and there's more. Victoria continued urgently. I overheard my father talking with a man from the mining company in Helena. The silver vein doesn't just run through your property. It extends beneath half the Callahan ranch. If you establish your claim first, you control access to all of it. The implications were staggering. No wonder the Callahans were desperate to drive her away. Why help me? Zara asked again. This could ruin your family. Victoria's expression hardened. They stopped being my family the day they drove my sister to her grave. I'm leaving for San Francisco on tomorrow's stage. This is my last chance to do right by Eleanor's memory. After Victoria left, Zara paced the cabin floor, weighing her options. She could wait for Vaughn's morning visit and tell him everything, but that might be too late. The cave was less than an hour's ride according to the map. If she left now, using the darkness as cover. Decision made. Zara wrote a quick note for Carlos and Matthew, slipped it under the barn door without waking them, and saddled James's old mare. The night was clear, with a nearly full moon providing enough light to follow the trail marked on Victoria's map. What Zara didn't see was the figure watching from the tree line, who mounted a horse and set off at a gallop once she was out of sight. The cave entrance was exactly where Victoria's map indicated, hidden behind a stand of pines on a rocky hillside. Zara tied her mare to a tree and approached cautiously, lantern in one hand and James's old revolver in the other. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. Inside, the passage widened into a limestone cavern with a ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. Zara raised her lantern, and the light caught on something embedded in the wall, a gleaming silver-gray streak running through the rock like a ribbon. James, she whispered, touching the vein with trembling fingers. You found it. Further exploration revealed that the deposit was substantial, running deep into the hillside, exactly as Victoria had described. With proof now before her eyes, Zara needed to return quickly and ride for the county seat at first light to file her claim. As she turned to leave, voices outside the cave froze her in place. She went in there not 5 minutes ago, a man said gruffly. Followed her all the way from the cabin. Good work, Mason. The second voice chilled Zara to the bone, Sheriff Callahan himself. We'll wait here. When she comes out, we'll take care of her once and for all. No one will question a tragic accident in these hills. Zara extinguished her lantern immediately, plunging herself into darkness. Her mind raced. The cave had only one entrance that she could see. She was trapped. Unless Victoria's map had shown something else. A secondary passage leading deeper into the cave system, eventually connecting to an exit on Callahan land. It was risky. The passage might be too narrow or blocked entirely. But waiting for death at the hands of Thomas Callahan was no choice at all. Guided only by touch and memory of the map, Zara felt her way along the cave wall until she found a fissure just wide enough to squeeze through. The passage beyond was tight and winding, forcing her to crawl in places. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she navigated the underground labyrinth, fighting against rising panic each time the walls seemed to close in further. When her hands finally felt cool night air, Zara nearly sobbed with relief. The exit was small, little more than a crevice in the hillside, but it was enough. She emerged into the moonlight on what was clearly Callahan property, evidenced by the brand on the cattle grazing nearby. She needed to get back to her homestead and warn Vaughn. But how? Her horse was still tied at the cave entrance, guarded by men who wanted her dead. The Callahan ranch house was visible in the distance, its windows glowing with lamplight. Beyond it lay Silver Creek, and beyond that, the Double K Ranch. As Zara weighed her impossible options, the sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her diving into a nearby thicket. A lone rider passed close by, a young ranch hand heading toward the Callahan house. Opportunity and desperation drove Zara to a reckless decision. She stepped into the path, causing the horse to rear in surprise. What the? The young cowboy, barely older than a boy, struggled to control his mount. Please, Zara said urgently, I need your help. Sheriff Callahan is trying to kill me. The boy peered at her in the moonlight, recognition dawning on his face. You're that widow lady they shaved. The one they've been saying awful things about. Those things aren't true, Zara insisted. The Callahans want my land for the silver beneath it. Please, if you have any decency, help me get to Von Keller's ranch. Something in her desperate plea must have moved him, for after a moment's hesitation, he extended his hand down to her. My pa always said the Callahans were meaner than snakes, he muttered, pulling her up behind him. Hold tight, ma'am. We're gonna ride fast. As they galloped through the night, Zara clung to the young cowboy and prayed they would reach Vaughn before Sheriff Callahan discovered she had escaped. The proof of silver was one thing, but now she had witnessed a murder plot, and that made her more dangerous to the Callahans than ever before. Von Keller was not a man given to panic, but finding Zara's homestead empty at dawn with only a cryptic note about following a map to the silver had sent him into a cold fury. Carlos and Matthew, shamefaced at having slept through her departure, had immediately set out to track her, while Vaughn had ridden back to gather more men. He was in the stable, saddling his best horse, when the sentry's call alerted him to approaching riders. Two coming in fast from the east, the ranch hand shouted. One looks to be Tim Parker's boy. Vaughn rushed to the yard, just as a lathered horse carrying two riders skidded to a halt. His heart nearly stopped when he saw Zara, dirt-streaked and disheveled, but gloriously alive, slide from the horse's back. Vaughn, she cried, stumbling toward him on exhausted legs. He caught her against his chest, one arm holding her close while his other hand still gripped his rifle. What happened? Where have you been? Between gasping breaths, Zara explained everything. Victoria's warning, the Silver Cave, Sheriff Callahan's ambush, and her narrow escape. By the time she finished, Vaughn's expression had transformed from relief to grim determination. Parker, he addressed the young cowboy who had brought Zara to safety. Ride into town and find Judge Patterson's clerk. Tell him we need mining claim papers brought to the Double K immediately. Tell no one else what you're doing. As the boy galloped off, Vaughn turned to his foreman. Sam, gather every man we can spare. The Callahans will be coming once they realize Zara's escaped, and they won't be coming peacefully. Inside the house, Rebecca tended to Zara's scrapes and bruises while Vaughn paced before the fireplace, working out a strategy. Once we file the mining claim, your legal position will be stronger, he explained to Zara. But Thomas Callahan has never been one to respect the law when it interferes with what he wants. What about Victoria? Zara asked. She risked everything to warn me. If her father discovers her betrayal, the morning stage to Virginia City leaves at 10, Rebecca interjected. If Victoria's on it as she planned, she should be safe. Vaughn nodded. We'll need to hold out until Judge Patterson can send federal marshals. That could be 2 days or more. The Callahans won't wait that long, Zara said softly. Not with so much at stake. A heavy silence fell over the room as the reality of their situation sank in. They were facing a powerful family willing to commit murder for silver, a family that controlled the local law and had already demonstrated their capacity for ruthless action. Zara. Vaughn knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. I promise to protect you, and I will. But I need to know you understand what might happen. This could get worse before it gets better. She looked into his eyes, seeing the concern there, but also the unwavering resolve. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing since that first morning when he had found her huddled and shamed on the streets of Silver Creek. "I understand," she replied, squeezing his hands. "James would have fought for what was rightfully ours. I can do no less." What remained unspoken was the growing certainty that her fight had become about more than just land or silver or even justice. It had become about a future she was beginning to envision, one that included the steadfast man before her. Outside, the sentry's call broke the moment. "Riders coming. At least a dozen, and they're armed." Vaughn rose to his feet, the tenderness in his expression replaced by the hard look of a man preparing for battle. "Stay inside with Rebecca," he ordered Zara. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, don't come out until I come for you." As he strode toward the door, rifle in hand, Zara called after him, "Vaughn." He paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. "Come back to me," she said simply. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Count on it." Then he was gone, leaving Zara to wonder if she had just found love again only to lose it to the Callahan's greed. Sheriff Thomas Callahan led a force of 15 men to the edge of Double K property, where they found Vaughn Keller and 8 ranch hands waiting, a wall of determined men and leveled rifles. "That's far enough, Thomas," Vaughn called out. "You're trespassing on private property." The sheriff sneered. "I'm in pursuit of a fugitive from justice. Zara Nichols is wanted for trespassing on Callahan land and theft of Callahan property. The only thieves here are wearing badges or the Callahan brand," Vaughn replied evenly. "Mrs. Nichols has filed a federal mining claim on her property as of an hour ago. The silver is legally hers." This news visibly rattled the sheriff, whose face flushed with anger. "You're lying. She couldn't have filed a claim yet." "Judge Patterson's clerk wrote out personally," Vaughn informed him, the satisfaction evident in his voice. "The paperwork is already on its way to Helena, and Mrs. Nichols has sworn testimony about your murder plot against her, witnessed and notarized." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Thomas Callahan's face. Then his expression hardened. "Step aside, Keller. That woman has bewitched you just like she did James. The Callahan family will have what's rightfully ours, even if you have to kill for it," Vaughn challenged. "Like you were planning to do at the cave last night." A murmur ran through the ranks of Callahan's men. Clearly, not all of them had been privy to the sheriff's murderous intentions. Thomas Callahan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Last chance, Keller. Hand over the woman, or we're coming through." Vaughn's rifle didn't waver. "You want her, you'll have to go through me first." "So be it." The sheriff raised his pistol, but before he could fire, a new voice rang out across the standoff. "That's enough." All heads turned to see Judge William Patterson himself riding toward them, flanked by 4 federal marshals and Victoria Callahan. The judge, a formidable man in his 60s with a shock of white hair and penetrating eyes, surveyed the scene with obvious disgust. "Sheriff Callahan," he thundered, "lower your weapon immediately, or my marshals will consider you in armed rebellion against federal authority." The marshals, grim-faced men with rifles at the ready, spread out to flank the Callahan forces. Slowly, reluctantly, Thomas Callahan lowered his pistol. "What is the meaning of this, Judge?" he demanded. "This is a local matter." This local matter became federal jurisdiction the moment Mrs. Nichols filed a legitimate mining claim, Judge Patterson interrupted. "And it became my personal concern when your daughter Victoria came to me this morning with a sworn affidavit detailing your conspiracy to commit murder." All eyes turned to Victoria, who sat straight-backed on her horse beside the judge, refusing to cower under her father's venomous glare. "You traitorous little," Thomas began. "Choose your next words carefully, Sheriff," one of the marshals warned, his rifle trained squarely on Callahan's chest. Judge Patterson dismounted with the dignity of his office. "Thomas Callahan, you are relieved of your duties as sheriff effective immediately. You and your sons are under federal indictment for conspiracy to commit murder, fraudulent land seizure, and obstruction of justice." As the marshals moved to take the Callahans into custody, Victoria rode forward to stand beside Vaughn. "I missed the morning stage," she explained. "Decided there was something more important than running away." She looked toward the house where Zara now stood on the porch, Rebecca at her side. "I owed it to Eleanor. And to you both." Later, After the Callahans had been led away in irons and Judge Patterson had taken formal statements from all involved, Vaughn found Zara sitting alone on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. "It's really over," she said wonderingly as he sat beside her. "The judge says my claim to the silver is ironclad. The Callahans will stand trial in Helena, away from their influence." "Justice at last," Vaughn agreed. "For you, for Eleanor, for everyone they've wronged." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the last light fade from the sky. Finally, Zara turned to face him directly. "What happens now, Vaughn?" He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "That depends on you, Zara. Your land is secure. You're wealthy in your own right with that silver claim. You could go anywhere, do anything. Is that what you want?" she asked softly. "For me to go?" Vaughn's eyes, so blue and earnest, held hers. "What I want is for you to be happy. What I hope is that your happiness might include me." Her heart swelled with emotion. "James will always be part of me," she said carefully. "I loved him truly. I would never ask you to forget him," Vaughn assured her. "He was my friend, and he loved you dearly. But I've found room in my heart for new love," Zara continued, her voice steadying with conviction. "A love born in the midst of struggle, tested by fire, and proven true." Vaughn's hand tightened around hers. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," Zara smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek, "that my happiness definitely includes you, Von Keller. If you'll have me." His answer came not in words but in the tender press of his lips against hers, a kiss that spoke of promise, of healing, and of a future bright with possibility. 1 year later, the Double K and Nichols ranches had merged not only through marriage but through prosperity. The silver mine, responsibly developed under Zara and Vaughn's supervision, had brought wealth enough to expand their holdings and improve the town of Silver Creek itself. Thomas Callahan and his sons remained in prison, their empire dismantled. Victoria had used her portion of the family assets to establish a school for girls in Helena, named in memory of her sister Eleanor. On a perfect autumn afternoon, Zara sat on the porch of what had once been her cabin with James, now expanded into a comfortable home she shared with Vaughn. Her hair had grown back beautifully, falling in chestnut waves past her shoulders. In her arms, she cradled their 2-month-old daughter, Sarah Eleanor Keller, named for both their mothers. Vaughn emerged from the barn, his shirt sleeves rolled up and his face bearing the contented look of a man who had found his purpose. He crossed to the porch and sat beside his wife and daughter, pressing a kiss to Zara's temple. "Happy?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Zara leaned into his embrace, their daughter nestled between them. "More than I ever dreamed possible." As the sun set on the Montana rangeland that had witnessed both their deepest sorrows and greatest joys, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of shame and despair, she had risen to find not only justice but a love that healed old wounds and promised new beginnings. "You're coming with me," the rancher had said that fateful morning, extending his hand to a shattered woman with no hope left. She had taken that hand, not knowing it would lead her home in every sense of the word. And now, surrounded by the family they had created together, Zara and Vaughn Keller faced the future with hearts full of gratitude and the unshakable bond of those who had fought side by side for something worth keeping.